Alright guys, here I am. This is take two for me. Kind of messed up on the first one there. We have a lot to get through. We're talking about sectionalism, and we're talking about the road to Civil War. Alright, and we kind of start in the 1850s as the major area here. Alright, now when we talk about sectional balance and sectional problems to that balance in the 1850s, obviously the first part of it is going to be California statehood. We talked about that California statehood came to become an issue because of the gold rush in 1849 and the Mexican War, which resulted in the United States acquiring California. All right, and as more and more people move out west to California, there's going to be less agriculture and less plantations, and therefore less slavery, or less people who want slavery. All right, so that becomes an issue. All right, you also have the Southern Fire Eaters threatening secession. So really, these Southern Fire Eaters, and this is what we kind of call those Southern congressmen who want the expansion of slavery, and they want to protect slavery at all costs. You know, and you have issues such as like the Wilmot Proviso, which is a provision to prohibit slavery, within the territories acquired by Mexico. You know, Polk is going to extend the Missouri Compromise line all the way to the West Coast, but what ends up happening is there's this alternative to allowing slavery out west in the new territories, as well as preventing slavery from being in existence, and it's called popular sovereignty, letting the states decide. Well, in 1848, this idea is going to come about because Polk's going to step down and not run for a second term, and in place of him, old rough and ready Zachary Taylor is going to get the nomination. All right, he's a Whig candidate who's going to win. All right, now Zachary Taylor is going to be very big on allowing states to decide slavery and making slavery become a state issue. And his whole thing is that the federal government does not have control over the states entirely, so therefore they should have some control. So he's going to propose in 1849 to allow California to enter the Union, and allowing New Mexico to enter the Union, and allowing the states themselves to decide slavery. Okay, Congress is going to refuse this proposal because there's a balance of 15 free and 15 slave states already, and so they feared there's an upset to a balance. All right, so these fire eaters are going to threaten secession. The third factor is the Underground Railroad and the fugitive slave issues, dealing with the personal liberty laws and the Prigg versus Pennsylvania. Okay, we'll talk about all of these in a little bit. But when we get to 1850 and the whole California entry issue, Henry Clay, who's kind of like on his last breath here, he's going to propose a compromise to allow California as a free state, and then allow the new territorial governments to decide slavery themselves using popular sovereignty. And then as compensation to the South, he wants to create a tougher fugitive slave law. All right. The first phase of debating is going to be heard by the older voices, Calhoun, Clay, Webster, whereas the second phase, after Clay's proposal is defeated, the second phase will be led by William Seward, who is Lincoln's or will be Lincoln's Secretary of State. Then you have Jefferson Davis, and Stephen Douglas. So you have all these kind of new heads versus old heads type of situation here. Well, unfortunately, though, Zachary Taylor is going to die in 1850, and Millard Fillmore comes to power as he was Taylor's vice president, and he is very, very weak. In fact, he's somewhat spineless, like a duck. Not that ducks are spineless, but anyways. He's going to support the compromise, and he's going to rally along with the Northern Whigs for support. All right, and what happens is Stephen Douglas is going to propose that they carry through Clay's compromise, but they're going to split it into smaller measures and allow each section of the country to vote on it, and they're going to vote for the measures that they support. Also, he's going to tie in the railroad. Obviously, as we mentioned in class, he's a really big proponent of the railroads going through the Midwest and connecting to the West Coast. And so he's going to propose to use government bonds and have the government pay for the railroad construction. Okay, the compromise will pass, but it's less widespread agreement, and it actually creates more sectionalism than anything else. Now, there's somewhat of an easy truce, so to speak, in the 1850s, but it's going to be very, very uneasy, especially when things like Harriet Beecher Stowe's book Uncle Tom's Cabin come about. All right, her book is going to bring the attention of slavery to the North and to really those who have no opinion. All right, what it does is it highlights the brutality of slavery and what happens to the slave. And because the North is so much more literate than the South, a lot of people who don't really have an opinion on slavery are now going to begin forming one because of how eloquently she writes. It's such a popular book that it sells 300,000 copies in the first year. It's the only book in history to outsell the Bible in a given year. And overall, about 2 million copies will be sold in a decade. All right. Along with the impact of Uncle Tom's Cabin, we also have this rise of new political parties. The Know Nothings, for example, who are pretty much natives. They're against the Catholics. They're against immigrants. You know, you're going to have the Know Nothings. We talked about the Free Soils Party today. So even though there's somewhat of a truce, there's still a lot of sectional divide in America. Okay. So when we get to the 1852 presidential election, Millard Fillmore is done. He's not going to get any support whatsoever. The Democrats are going to support Franklin Pierce, who has this idea of a young America. All right, he's going to try to ignore the decisive issues of slavery by focusing on expansion. He's going to take James K. Polk's route of focusing on manifest destiny. Okay, and he really wants to expand American democracy throughout the world. And he thinks by focusing on this expansion, less people will be tied up into the slave issue. And what he really promotes is capturing two islands nearby. One is Cuba and the other is Hawaii. Attempts to capture Cuba are going to be opposed by the anti-slavery Northerners, though, who just fear that by bringing Cuba in, they're going to keep slavery. And then the South is really going to oppose acquiring Hawaii because they prohibit slavery as part of their state or their territory constitution. So his efforts to get around slavery are nice and grand, but he fails to recognize how embedded slavery is in the United States. Okay, and there you see he kind of easily wins. This is going to take us to the Kansas-Nebraska controversy in 1854. See, what happens is in 1850, settlers are going to begin moving into the Plains area. California's kind of packed already in a short period of time, and so more and more people are going to move into that middle of the country, Kansas-Nebraska territory. All right, it's very suitable for farming. The government's going to promote it to help dislodge the Native Americans from reservations, to get them to move even further away from their original lands. But what happens is, with the settlement of farmers in that area, the issue of the railroad and slavery become heightened again. All right, railroad is used to solve communication problems between the old states and the new states. All right, and so there's a promotion of this transcontinental railroad. All right, with the transcontinental railroad, there's a huge disagreement over whether the eastern terminus or terminal should be in Chicago or in the South. Jefferson Davis is going to organize the Gadsden Purchase in 1853 from Mexico to make the southern route possible. All right, but again, by acquiring that territory, there's this idea that it's going to help promote the expansion of slavery westward. Just as with Stephen Douglas, who's promoting the Chicago terminal, it's going to promote this idea of opposition of slavery and anti-slave states. All right, free states. Okay, so in 1854, Stephen Douglas is going to propose opening the Nebraska territory for white settlements. All right, again, it's going to clear the way for the Transcontinental Railroad. Kansas, north of the Missouri Compromise line, had to be free. All right. So to gain passage, what Douglas does is he proposes dividing Nebraska territory into two, Nebraska and Kansas, and each one would decide slavery by popular sovereignty. All right. The problem with this is it's going to totally repeal the Missouri Compromise, which says there's no slavery above 3630. So if in the Nebraska territory up here they vote to keep slavery or allow it, then the Missouri Compromise is totally repealed. Okay, President Pierce is going to support this divide in the Kansas-Nebraska Act, and it's going to have an immediate and sweeping consequence. First of all, the Whig Party is going to be divided over it, and it's going to completely destroy the Whig Party. Gone by 1856. The party is done. A party who's been around since 1836 is now going to be gone by 1856. Also, it's going to divide the Northern Democrats because half of them are just going to disagree with repealing the Missouri Compromise. People in both parties, the Whigs and the Northern Democrats, are going to join to form the Republican Party in 1854, and we'll get to that. But what happens is, because of the proximity that Kansas territory has with the southern states, you're going to have settlers from Missouri and from the Indian Territory and Arkansas and Texas move into the Kansas territory, and they're going to get slavery nominated, or they're going to try to anyways. By 1855 elections, Southerners from Missouri travel into Kansas, and they're going to vote. They're going to commit voter fraud. Pro-slavery legislation is elected, and they're going to legalize it. Now, free state supporters in the state are going to form their own constitution and apply for statehood. So even with an election that recognized, pro-slavery, the free state supporters are going to have such disagreement with it that they're going to try to create their own constitution. What happens is an event we call Bleeding Kansas.